The second the garage door rumbled shut behind their SUV, I let out the breath I'd been holding all morning. My brother-in-law's BMW was finally pulling out of the driveway, and I could see my sister waving through the tinted back window, her hand fluttering like she was already on a beach somewhere. 10 days. 10 days of watching their kid while they rekindled their marriage in Tulum. I turned around in their spotless kitchen, ready to ask my nephew if he wanted to break out the Legos or order pizza for lunch. He wasn't there. I found him in the hallway, standing perfectly still in front of the closet door, his small fingers pressed flat against the wood like he was listening for something inside it. He was wearing the navy blue corduroy overalls my sister had laid out for him that morning, the ones she always picked because she said they photographed well. His blonde hair stuck up in the back from sleep. He was 7 years old, and the doctor said he was severely autistic, nonverbal since age 2, would probably never communicate beyond pointing and grunting. He turned his head and looked right at me. Not through me. At me. And then my nephew, the boy I'd been told had been locked inside his own mind for 5 years, said in a voice as clear and steady as a church bell, "Aunt Whitney, please don't open any of the wine she left in the fridge. She put something in the corked one for you. The white one in the door is okay." My knees actually buckled. I had to grab the wall to stay upright. My purse hit the floor. I heard my keys skitter across the tile. Let me back up. Let me back all the way up, because I need you to understand how a normal Saturday morning in suburban Atlanta turned into the day I learned my entire family had been performing a play I didn't know I was a character in. My name is Whitney. I'm 31. I work as a paralegal at a real estate firm downtown, the kind of place where everyone wears blazers in August and pretends the AC isn't broken. I'm not a glamorous person. My idea of a wild Friday is a glass of Pinot Grigio and a true crime podcast. People always tell me I'm the calm one in my family, which I used to take as a compliment until I realized it just meant nobody worried about whether I was okay. My older sister is named Bridget. She's 38, and she's the kind of woman who shows up to a backyard barbecue in a white linen jumpsuit and somehow doesn't get a single drop of barbecue sauce on her. She married my brother-in-law Patrick 12 years ago. He's a commercial real estate developer with a handshake that's slightly too firm and a smile that never quite reaches his eyes. They have one son, my nephew, Cooper. Cooper was born on a Tuesday in October. I remember because I drove 3 hours from Athens, where I was finishing my last semester at UGA, to be at the hospital. I was the second person to hold him after Bridget. Patrick had stepped out to take a call. Bridget was exhausted, drugged up on whatever they give you after a C-section, and she handed Cooper to me and said, "Whit, you're going to be his favorite. I just know it." She wasn't wrong in the beginning. Cooper was a chatty toddler. He called me Aunt Winnie because he couldn't say Whitney yet, and he'd run to the door every time I came over, holding up a stuffed dinosaur or half-eaten cracker like it was a gift. He sang songs. He made up stories about the cul-de-sac cat. He told me, very seriously one Easter when he was almost 2.5, that he was going to grow up and be a fireman ninja. Then, somewhere around his 3rd birthday, he just stopped. That's how Bridget told it anyway. She called me crying, said Cooper had regressed, that he wouldn't make eye contact, wouldn't respond to his name, wouldn't speak. She'd taken him to a developmental pediatrician. Late onset autism, severe end of the spectrum. Probably nonverbal for life. The doctor had said the prognosis was poor. I remember sitting on the floor of my apartment in Athens, phone pressed to my ear, sobbing along with her. I sent flowers. I sent a card. I drove down on weekends and sat with Cooper while he stared at the ceiling fan and didn't react when I called his name. He flinched when I tried to hug him. He'd stim by tapping his fingers in patterns of 3 against his leg. I believed it. Why wouldn't I? She was my sister. He was my nephew. I had no reason to think anything else. Our parents both passed within 18 months of each other. Daddy went first, a heart attack on the back 9 of his Saturday golf game. He was 64. Mama held on for another 1.5 years before the cancer she'd been fighting quietly, the one she didn't tell us about until it was stage 4, finally took her too. Mama had been a math teacher for 35 years. Daddy ran a small chain of hardware stores across North Georgia. They were not flashy people, but they'd been careful. Very, very careful. When the will was read, I learned just how careful. Almost $2 million in a family trust, plus the house in Marietta where we grew up. The trust had a clause. Any major distribution required signatures from both daughters. Mama had set it up that way. The house was left to me alone because Bridget and Patrick already owned a 4-bedroom McMansion in Brookhaven, and Mama said in her letter that she wanted me to have somewhere of my own. I thought it was sweet. I thought it was fair. I now know my mother saw something the rest of us didn't. That brings me to last Thursday night, when Bridget called me with that honey-warm voice she only used when she wanted something. Her marriage was struggling. Patrick had been distant. They needed to reconnect. She'd booked a last-minute resort package in Tulum, 10 days, all-inclusive. Could I please come stay at the house and watch Cooper? Mrs. Aldridge from next door could help with the school pickup, but she wanted family with him at night. He responded best to family. Of course I said yes. I always said yes to Bridget. I drove over to their house on Saturday at 10 in the morning. The lawn was perfect. The hydrangeas she planted last spring were blooming an unnatural shade of blue. Patrick was loading luggage into the back of an Uber Black, and he gave me a quick wave but didn't make eye contact. He looked thinner than I remembered, and he kept wiping his palms on the front of his khakis. I figured he was anxious about flying. Bridget pulled me into a hug at the front door, which struck me as odd because Bridget is not a hugger. She wore a white silk blouse, and her hair was in that effortless beach wave that takes 90 minutes to achieve. She walked me through the house like I'd never been there before. Here's the kitchen. Here's Cooper's room. Here's the iPad with his communication app, though he barely uses it. Here's the schedule on the fridge. Mrs. Aldridge is in the contacts. The neighbor on the other side, Wesley, has a key in case of emergencies. Then she opened the wine fridge. I picked up a couple of bottles for you, she said, smiling. I know it's been a hard year. You've worked so much. The corked one is from that little vineyard you love in Dahlonega. I had them set it aside especially. I almost cried, honestly. It was one of the kindest things she'd done for me in years. I thanked her. I told her she shouldn't have. She told me of course she should have. Then she hugged me again, the second hug in a single morning, and she and Patrick climbed into the Uber, and I watched the taillights round the corner of the cul-de-sac. I closed the front door. I turned around, and my nonverbal nephew was standing in the hallway warning me about the wine. I sank down onto the floor right there in their fancy entryway, the one with the gray slate tile and the live-edge console table that cost more than my car payment. Cooper walked over. Slowly, carefully, like he was approaching a deer he didn't want to startle. He sat down across from me, crisscross applesauce, and folded his hands in his lap. Cooper, I whispered. Buddy. You can talk. He nodded. How long? I never stopped, Aunt Winnie. He hadn't called me Aunt Winnie since he was 2.5. I made a sound that was somewhere between a sob and a laugh and pressed my hand against my mouth. Mommy made me stop, he said. His voice was so matter-of-fact it broke something inside me. She said if I talked, you would die. She said my words were poison. So I made my mouth a box, and I put all the words inside, and I sat on the lid. I'm a grown woman, and I'm not ashamed to say I cried like a child on that gray slate floor. Cooper let me. He didn't move. He just watched me, with those serious green eyes, the same green as my mother's, and he waited. When I could finally speak, I asked him to tell me everything. He'd been almost 3, he said. He'd come downstairs for a juice box one afternoon, and he'd heard Mommy on the phone in the laundry room. She didn't know he was there. She was using the voice she used when she was angry but pretending not to be. She was talking to Daddy. He'd heard the words Whitney and the trust. And we just need her out of the picture for a little while. And she's gullible. She'll never see it coming. He hadn't understood most of it, but he'd understood Whitney. He'd understood that something bad was being planned for me. The next morning, like any 3-year-old who heard something he didn't understand, he toddled into the kitchen and asked Mommy, "What does out of the picture mean?" Bridget had set down her coffee. She'd knelt down in front of him and grabbed his shoulders too tight. She put her face an inch from his, and she'd said, in a voice he'd never heard her use before, "Cooper, listen to me. Every word that comes out of your mouth is a bullet. If you ever speak again, if you ever say one single word, those bullets will kill Aunt Whitney. Do you love Aunt Whitney?" He'd nodded, terrified. "Then you will not speak. Not to me, not to Daddy, not to anyone. Ever. Or your aunt will die and it will be your fault." Cooper was 3 years old. He loved me. He went silent. The room blurred. I had to put my head between my knees for a second. 5 years. He had been carrying this for 5 years. He had watched me come and go from his life, watched me bring him books and presents and birthday cakes, and he had bitten down on every word he wanted to say to me because his mother had convinced him his voice was a weapon. "How are you talking now?" I asked. "What changed?" He shrugged in that small Cooper way. "I'm older now. I read a lot. I read about narcissists in one of Mommy's magazines, and last night I heard her and Daddy talking again. About the wine. About the lawyer in Charlotte. About signing things. I figured if she was going to hurt you for real, then me being quiet didn't help anymore. The deal didn't work. So the deal was broken." He said it like he was explaining a math problem. Then he said, "I know where she keeps the papers. I'm going to skip over the part where I almost threw up in their powder room. I'm going to skip over the part where I called my best friend Roxanne, who is an ER nurse and the most level-headed human being I know, and told her to come over right now and don't ask questions. She showed up 40 minutes later in scrubs and a ponytail with a giant Yeti tumbler of cold brew, and when I told her what was happening, she said, 'Whitney, honey, I need you to take a breath and tell me again slowly,' and I did. And when I finished, she looked at Cooper and said, 'Kid, you are the most metal 7-year-old I have ever met.'" Cooper smiled. Just a tiny, unpracticed smile. His face didn't quite know what to do with it. It was the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. Roxanne pulled on the latex gloves she carries in her purse because, as she puts it, you never know when you'll need to handle a biohazard at brunch. She took a sample of the wine from the corked bottle. She knew a talk screen tech at Emory who'd run it overnight as a favor. Then Cooper led us upstairs to the office. Bridget's office is a Pinterest board come to life. White everything. A pampas grass arrangement. A locked bottom desk drawer with a 4-digit keypad. "What's the code, buddy?" I asked. Cooper said 1028, my birthday. Of course it was his birthday. Bridget loved a sentimental detail. It made her feel like a deep person. I punched in the code. The lock clicked. What was inside that drawer is the reason I am still able to sit here and tell you the story. A folder of bank authorization forms, 6 of them, with my signature at the bottom. Except it wasn't my signature. It was close. The G in Whitney was wrong. The way I crossed my T's, the slight backward slant, the loop at the bottom of the Y. Bridget had been practicing for a long time, but she hadn't gotten it perfect. I would have noticed. Anyone who really knew my handwriting would have noticed. Bank statements from the family trust account. Every single month for the past 16 months, withdrawals between $9,000 and $14,000, always under $15,000. Always under the federal reporting threshold, $220,000, give or take. Gone. I sat down on the white office rug because my legs stopped working again. Email printouts. Bridget had been corresponding with a lawyer in Charlotte, North Carolina, named Reginald something. She'd been telling him I was unstable, that I had a history of depression, that I had had a breakdown after our mother's death and was no longer competent to manage trust assets. There was a meeting scheduled for day 6 of their vacation. A meeting where Bridget intended to walk into that lawyer's office with forged emergency transfer documents and move the entire remaining trust into her sole name. But the worst thing, the thing that made me physically nauseous, was a manila folder labeled Whitney, documentation. Inside were dozens of pages in Bridget's handwriting, dated entries going back almost 2 years. Each one a fabricated incident. October 2023. Whit called me at 2 a.m. crying, slurring her words, refused to tell me if she'd taken anything. I'm worried. February 2024. Whit forgot Cooper's birthday entirely, showed up 3 days late and seemed confused about the date. June 2024. Whit told Mama she sees Daddy in the corner of her bedroom at night. Mama is scared. None of it was real. Not a single incident. She had written a fictional version of me, a sad, broken, mentally unwell version, and she had been documenting it on dated pages for years, building a paper trail in case anyone ever questioned why she'd taken the trust. My own sister had been writing me into a character she could destroy. Roxanne photographed every single page. She didn't say much. She just kept saying, okay, we've got it, we've got her, okay. Cooper sat in the corner of the office with his knees pulled up to his chest, and he watched us. Calm, quiet, already used to being a witness. The lat call came around 9 that evening. Roxanne stepped out into the hallway to take it, and when she came back, her face was a stone. The corked wine had been spiked. A heavy dose of Zolpidem and a generic over-the-counter laxative, the kind you can buy in bulk at a Costco. Not a lethal cocktail, just enough to put me on a bathroom floor for 2 or 3 days, dehydrated, semi-conscious, easily explained away as a stomach virus. While I was incapacitated, Bridget would have driven up to Charlotte and emptied my mother's trust. I sat on Cooper's bedroom rug that night with a glass of water that tasted like metal in my mouth, and I made 2 phone calls. The first was to a man named Davis, a former classmate of mine from Emory. We'd lost touch after college, but I knew he was now a federal prosecutor in the Northern District of Georgia. He answered on the 3rd ring. I told him everything in one long, breathless rush. When I stopped talking, there was a long silence. Then he said, "Whitney, this is wire fraud, forgery, attempted poisoning, and child psychological abuse. The poisoning crosses into attempted aggravated assault. If she's planning to move money across state lines, that's federal too. You do not need to handle this alone. I'm going to make some calls. Do not, under any circumstance, let your sister know you know." The second call was to Mrs. Aldridge next door. I told her Cooper would be with me full time. I didn't explain why. She didn't ask. She'd lived next to Bridget for 9 years, and the way she said, "Of course, sweetheart, you let me know if you need anything at all," told me that maybe she'd noticed things over those 9 years that I hadn't. That night, I slept on the floor of Cooper's room. He asked me to. He hadn't slept in the same room as another person since he was 3. He kept reaching out in the dark to touch my arm, just to make sure I was still there. Day 2 was the performance of my life. Bridget had texted at 6:30 in the morning, a bright, cheery good morning text with a sun emoji. "Hope you and Coop are having fun. Don't forget the wine. Treat yourself. XO." I waited 2 hours, then I sent her this, "Bridge, I think I'm coming down with something. I drank a glass of that wine last night and I've been throwing up all morning. So dizzy. I'm going to go lie down. Cooper is fine. Mrs. A said she can take him for the day if I get worse. I'm so sorry. Don't worry about me. Just enjoy your trip. Love you." I stared at the screen for a full minute before I hit send. She wrote back within 4 minutes. "Oh no. Feel better, honey. Probably just stress. Get some rest. Don't worry about Cope. Mrs. A is great. We'll check in tomorrow. Love you." 2 exclamation points and a sparkly heart. That was my sister's response to learning I was, in her mind, currently being poisoned. She didn't ask which doctor. She didn't ask if I needed anything. She didn't offer to call anyone. Just 2 exclamation points and a heart. Roxanne, reading over my shoulder, said quietly, "She's a sociopath, Whit. I'm sorry. I know she's your sister, but this is what they look like." By that afternoon, Davis had spun up a full operation. Local Atlanta police were in the loop. The FBI was looped in too because of the interstate piece. They quietly contacted the lawyer in Charlotte, Reginald Pemberton, and shown him the forged signatures next to mine. He'd gone gray. He hadn't known. He'd had a bad feeling about the documentation she'd sent ahead, the medical claims about my instability, but he hadn't followed his gut. Now he was cooperating fully. The meeting with Bridget would happen as scheduled on day 6. Federal agents would be in the conference room. My job was to keep texting sick. Day 3, still really weak. Doctor thinks bad food poisoning. Cooper is being so good. Don't cut your trip short. AXO day 4. Tiny bit better. Slept 12 hours. So tired. Have a margarita for me. Day 5. Almost back to normal. Just resting today. She sent back hearts. She sent back beach selfies. She sent back a video of Patrick on a jet ski, his back to the camera. He looked even from behind like a man who knew his marriage and his life were about to be incinerated. I think part of him was already grieving. I think part of him had been grieving for years. On the morning of day 6, while my sister was getting dressed in her hotel room in Tulum to go to a meeting in Charlotte that she would not survive, I sat in her kitchen with Cooper and Roxanne and a forensic interviewer named Janine, who specialized in child witnesses. Cooper had to give a recorded statement. It had to be done correctly, under protocol, so that nothing he said could be challenged later. He sat in a chair that was too big for him in his great-grandfather's old armchair, the only piece of furniture in that house I actually liked, and he told Janine everything, the phone call he overheard at age 3, the threats, the 5 years of silence. The night before the trip, when he heard them planning, the wine. He spoke for almost an hour. When he was done, he looked at me through the doorway and he said, "I'm tired, Aunt Winnie." I went and picked him up. He was almost too big to hold, but I held him anyway, and he fell asleep against my shoulder with his face buried in my collarbone. Janine, the interviewer, watched us for a long moment. Then she said, very quietly, "I have been doing this for 22 years. I've never had a child witness like him. He's going to need a lot of help, but he's going to be okay. Kids who can do what he just did, they find their way." I held on to that. I held on to it through everything that came next. Day 7, 11 a.m. Eastern. Pemberton's law office, 16th floor of a high-rise in uptown Charlotte. I wasn't there. Davis had set up a secure feed so I could watch from Bridget's couch in Atlanta. Cooper sat next to me in his pajamas eating Eggo waffles with peanut butter, which is apparently his favorite breakfast, and which I learned only that week. Roxanne was on my other side with her hand on my back. The conference room camera showed Bridget walking in first. She looked unbelievable. She'd somehow managed to pack a charcoal sheath dress and pearls for a vacation, and her hair was in a low chignon. She was holding a leather portfolio. The portfolio with the forged documents. Patrick trailed behind her, looking like he hadn't slept in a week. He was sweating through his collar. There were 3 people already in the room. Pemberton, gray and tired-looking, at the head of the table, and 2 people in plain professional clothes who were not lawyers, a man and a woman. Bridget hesitated in the doorway. "I thought this was a private meeting," she said, in that honey voice. Pemberton did not stand up. "Mrs. Holloway, please sit down. Agent Reyes and Agent Kim have some questions for you. I will tell you, I have watched my sister be many things in my life: smug, patronizing, cruel in small, deniable ways, but I had never in 31 years seen her face do what it did in that moment. The mask didn't crack, the mask just fell off. There was a half-second where I saw her, the actual her, the her under all the linen jumpsuits and beach waves, and what I saw was something cold and small and feral. Then she sat down and crossed her legs and said, 'Of course, I'm happy to help with whatever this is.' Agent Reyes laid out the forged signatures next to my real ones. Bridget said I had inconsistent handwriting. Agent Kim laid out the bank statements with the 16 months of withdrawals. Bridget said she'd had verbal authorization from me for each one. Agent Reyes laid out the email correspondence with Pemberton. Bridget said she'd been concerned about me. Agent Kim laid out the lab report on the wine. Bridget said someone must have tampered with it after she gave it to me, that it must have been Whitney herself, that I'd probably done it on purpose to frame her, because, as her own documentation showed, I was mentally unstable. Then Agent Reyes pulled out a tablet and said, "Mrs. Holloway, we'd like you to listen to something." She pressed play. A child's voice filled the conference room. Steady. Clear. "Cooper, my mom told me when I was 3 years old that if I ever talked again, my Aunt Whitney would die. She said my words were bullets. So I stopped talking for 5 years to protect her. I watched my sister's face on the screen. I watched the moment she understood what she was hearing. I watched the moment she understood that her son, the son she had silenced and used and lied about for half a decade, had been listening the whole time, had been remembering, had been waiting. Patrick made a sound like an animal being put down. He turned to Bridget and he said, "Oh my God, Bridge. Oh my God. What did you do to him? What did you do to our son?" She turned on him with absolute venom. "Shut up. Shut your mouth. Don't you dare." Patrick pushed back from the table. "I want a separate lawyer. I want my own deal. I'll testify. I'll tell them everything. The trust, the wine, all of it. She made me sign things. I told her I didn't want to. I told her, Patrick, I swear to God, Mrs. Halloway." Agent Reyes stood. "Please put your hands behind your back. You're under arrest." The handcuffs clicked. Bridget kept talking. She talked the whole way out of that conference room. Excuses, justifications, accusations, theories. Nobody was listening. The agents walked her down the hallway and into the elevator and out of the building, and through a second camera I watched my sister, who'd worn that linen jumpsuit to a barbecue in June and never spilled a drop, be folded into the back of a Charlotte Mecklenburg police cruiser on a Thursday morning. I felt Cooper's small hand slip into mine. "Is it done now, Aunt Winnie?" he said. I couldn't talk for a second. I just nodded. Then I said, "It's done, buddy. It's done." 3 weeks later, we stood in front of a judge in Fulton County Family Court. The custody hearing was short. Patrick had signed away his parental rights as part of his cooperation deal. He'd known since Cooper was 3. He'd been afraid of his wife. He'd folded exactly the way Cooper had described, like every cheap thing in that beautiful house had eventually folded. He didn't deserve to be Cooper's father, and somewhere in whatever was left of his conscience he knew it. The judge was an older black woman with kind eyes and reading glasses on a beaded chain. She read the file. She looked up over the rims of her glasses at Cooper, who was wearing a little blue blazer and the dinosaur tie I'd bought him from a Target in Buckhead. She said, "Young man, I understand you recently started speaking again after a very long time. That took a lot of courage. Where would you like to live?" Cooper stood up. He was not even 4 feet tall. He held on to the edge of the table. "I'd like to live with my Aunt Winnie, please, ma'am," he said. "She's the only grown-up who ever sat with me when I couldn't say anything. She read me books even when I couldn't tell her I liked them. She always made me banana pancakes the way I liked them, with the chocolate chips making a smiley face, even when she didn't know I was watching her make them." The whole courtroom got very quiet. The judge wiped her eye very quickly with one knuckle. She signed the paperwork. I sold the McMansion in Brookhaven. The trust money was recovered, most of it traced through Bridget's accounts. I became sole trustee. Cooper got his own bedroom in my mother's house in Marietta, the house I now finally understood she had left to me on purpose. We painted his room green. He chose the color. He said it was the color of grass after rain. He started speech therapy and cognitive therapy. His progress has been slow in some ways and breathtaking in others. His 3rd-grade teacher told me at conferences last month that he is the most observant child she has ever taught. He doesn't miss anything, she said, and he's starting to make jokes, quiet, dry little jokes. His timing is incredible. Bridget pled out. 12 to 15 years, with the child's psychological abuse charge being the one that finally made her take the deal. I have not visited her. I will not. I do not know if I will ever see her again. Patrick got 4 years and lost his real estate license. I do not think about him at all. Last Sunday morning, Cooper came down to the kitchen in his pajamas and asked if he could help me make pancakes. He's 8 now. His birthday was last week. We'd had a small party. 3 kids from his class. A dinosaur cake. He climbed up on the step stool next to the stove and he watched me crack the eggs into the bowl. He told me in great detail about a book he was reading on the Cretaceous period and about why ankylosaurs were objectively superior to all other dinosaurs, and about a dream he'd had where our cat could fly, but only in the kitchen and only on Tuesdays. I listened. I really listened. I made him pancakes with chocolate chips, arranged in a smiley face. He ate 3 of them. When he finished, he put his fork down and he looked at me with my mother's green eyes and he said, "Aunt Winnie, thank you for letting me talk, for listening to me even when I'm boring. I told him he's never boring. I told him he's the bravest person I know. I told him I'm so glad he's mine. He nodded, very serious, and went back to telling me about ankylosaurs. My mother was right about a lot of things. She was right that the trust should require both signatures. She was right that I should have my own house. She was right that Bridget had become someone she didn't recognize. But the thing she was most right about, the thing I think about every morning when I pour my coffee and watch my nephew eat his cereal, is that the quietest people in the room are not always the weakest. Sometimes they're just keeping a careful inventory of every wrong thing happening around them, waiting for the moment when speaking will finally do more good than silence. Cooper kept that inventory for 5 years. He saved my life with it. Some stories end. Ours, I think, is just learning how to begin. I think about that gray slate floor a lot. The moment my purse hit the tile and Cooper said my old baby name out loud after 5 years of silence. I think about it when I'm pouring his cereal in the morning, when I'm folding his little dinosaur pajamas, when I'm sitting in the car line at his school listening to the same playlist of show tunes he insists on. I think about it because that single moment was the consequence of 1,000 smaller moments I never paid attention to. Bridget didn't wake up one morning and decide to poison me. She got there one quiet choice at a time. She chose to envy instead of celebrate. She chose to manipulate instead of ask. She chose to silence a 3-year-old instead of confront her own greed. Every cruelty was a seed she planted, and the harvest was a federal courtroom and a son who flinched at her name. Cause and effect. The universe is a strict bookkeeper. It always balances eventually. What still humbles me is Cooper. A 3-year-old made a choice too. He didn't have the words for it, but he made the most moral decision in that house. He chose love over comfort. He chose to protect someone he barely knew over the easy path of just being a kid. That kind of integrity at that age is not something you teach, but you can poison it, and Bridget tried. She tried for 5 years. She failed because Cooper had something she never understood, a quiet inner compass that kept pointing the same direction even when the whole house lied to him about which way was north. I learned something hard that week. Goodness without sharpness is not enough. I had been kind to Bridget my whole life. I trusted her, defended her, brought her casseroles when she had her son, signed whatever she put in front of me. And my softness almost killed me. I confused being agreeable with being good. They are not the same thing. Real goodness has eyes. It pays attention. It asks the second question. It notices when the bottle of wine is corked and the hugs are happening twice in one morning. Wisdom is what turns kindness into something that can actually protect the people you love, including yourself. And then there is the part that nobody warned me about, which is how much sheer endurance the right thing requires. Texting my sister fake sick updates for 5 days while my hands shook. Sitting through Cooper's recorded interview without screaming. Watching the courtroom video of Bridget's mask falling off and not letting myself look away. Strength of character isn't the dramatic moment. It's the boring middle. It's day 3 when you want to quit pretending and just call the police and run. You don't quit. You hold the line because a child is depending on you to hold it. Cooper taught me that the bravest people are usually the smallest ones in the room. Pay attention to the quiet ones. Love them out loud. And when the moment comes that asks you to be sharp, be sharp. The ones who love you are counting on it.